Hey MVPs, Rico Knows here. Going to talk to you guys about a 2024 futures bet. If you're not aware, 2024 futures bet, all that really means is I am doing a deep dive on a particular team and telling you whether or not you can make this bet for their win total in the 2024 season. If you go to FanDuel or whatever sports book you're using and you go to college football tab, you should be able to find win totals. If you can find them, make this bet. If not, use this information to help you moving through the season, okay? It's really important you have this foundational knowledge about every single team. You can go back, go on to Patreon, do a search in the search bar for whatever team you're curious about. If I've made a video about them, it'll come up. Just type in the name of the school and we're good to go. So here we are talking about South Carolina, regular season's wins. They have them at 5.5 wins. Do you think South Carolina is going to win 5 games or 6 games next year? So let's go look at 2023. And in 2023, they managed to win 5 games. They went 3-5 in the SEC, and they ended the season with a loss to Clemson. But if you go and look at it, they had a disappointing performance against North Carolina. Initially, in the first game of the season, I thought they were going to win that game. They didn't get it done. Spencer Rattler was supposed to show up. It turns out North Carolina had Omarion Hampton, and they discovered a running game that nobody knew they were going to have. Shout out to him. Beating Furman, congratulations. Being very competitive on the road at Georgia. I believe they were in the lead at the half. We were feeling pretty good about it. Georgia comes back and wins that game. Beating Mississippi State, not a big deal. It happens at home, 37-30. Going on the road to Tennessee, not quite ready for that game. 2 weeks to prepare for Florida at home, and you still lose to a very bad Florida team. Even at their worst, they're still 2 points better than you. That's not good. Not good. Going on the road to Missouri, didn't stand a chance. On the road at A&M, I think they're very comparable to A&M talent-wise, just so we're clear. Okay, Jacksonville State, beating a good Jacksonville State team by 10 points, blowing out Vanderbilt, who didn't, beating Kentucky, very important. They beat Kentucky last year, and then losing to Clemson in a tight game. So, South Carolina, Shane Beamer, head coach Shane Beamer, son of legendary coach Frank Beamer, doing all that he can to really make South Carolina great again. Right? Trying to make them a perennial power of some sort. And he's found his quarterback. And we're going to talk about last season. They had Spencer Rattler here. He threw for 3,100 yards, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Former 5-star quarterback. Was a 5th rounder. But they have LaNorris Sellers. And he's this guy, and you're going to discover this guy. He's in the picture below me. He's got these goggles, looking like Eric Dickerson. And LaNorris Sellers is a high school quarterback from South Carolina, born and raised. He looks like Vince Young, but he throws better. He's a dual threat, tall, skinny, athletic kid. He looks like Vince Young, but he throws even better. Dominated in the spring game. He is known goods across the college football landscape. And he's got the reins to run this offense. And that's pretty scary because you're trying to bet on a redshirt freshman quarterback, and you're not sure how he's going to perform. Is he going to be great, or is he going to have growing pains? I'd imagine growing pains are, inevitable, but at the same time, he looks special. He really does. Their backup quarterback, we'll get to it, but everybody else hit the portal. I think Luke Doughty moved to wide receiver, by the way. That's a different conversation. Luke did move to wide receiver. We'll talk about it. Mario Anderson hit the transfer portal, team's leading rusher, Division II All-American from Newberry. He actually hit the portal. He's now at Memphis. Shout out to him. Jacarion Joyner was a dual threat Swiss Army knife quarterback, wide receiver, running back. They could never figure him out. They let him play running back. It didn't work out. Averaged 2.4 yards a carry. The reason for stuff like this is the offensive line was terrible last year. It was really bad. Okay. Juju McDowell, Lee County's finest. One of these Georgia kids who you really believed in, and for whatever reason, the coaching staff has just over-recruited and said Juju McDowell is not going to be our running back. We don't believe in Juju McDowell. This is a guy who was supposed to be second string, eventually become the starting running back. They've had a ton of great running backs in South Carolina over the last 3 or 4 years, and most of them transfer out once they find a starter. Juju McDowell stuck around, and he's not going to start. You're not going to see him at all. A lot of these guys you're not going to see. There's Nicholas Harbor. If you don't know Nick Harbor, one of the fastest players in college football. The only difference is he is, how big is he? 6'4", 6'5", 240. and he runs like a 10, 100 meters. He's a freak athlete. We're not sure how to get him the ball. We're not sure what to do with this young man, but he was an athlete coming out of high school. He's labeled him an athlete. The number one guy. He's got DK Metcalf written all over him. The way he's built is weird. He should be a defensive end rushing quarterbacks, making millions of dollars in the NFL. We don't know what you're supposed to do with Nicholas Harbor, but he's so amazing. That is a unique specimen and athlete in college football, and I'm sure they're going to draft him. They don't care about his production. Just what are we going to do with him? Okay? South Carolina, they moved him to wide receiver. Just so you're aware. And he played wide receiver in high school along with a number of other positions. Don't worry about a lot of these receivers. They won't be on the depth chart, if you will. Xavier Leggett, you guys know the deal. First round draft pick. He's gone, right? Shout out to him. Got drafted in the first round. Who did he get drafted by? I did the draft review on it. North Carolina. The Panthers, my bad. I know this. All right, a lot of deep balls. Trey Knox was a 6'7" wide receiver, turned into a tight end, came over from Arkansas. Don't worry about Brown. Joshua Simon matters because he's coming back. And Joshua Simon has a lot of experience. This is a Western Kentucky tight end who transferred in 2 years prior and, split time, and now he's going to be the starter at tight end, and I think he's a really good player, just so you know. Omega Blake, pretty sure he hit the portal and he's gone. Nick Harbor, like I talked about, get him the ball. We'll see what happens. Portal gone. There's Luke Doty. I told you he's a wide receiver. They got him as a quarterback, but they moved him. Man, they're using these guys anywhere. Eddie Lewis, gone. Joyner, gone. Juju McDowell, not relevant. Beanie Wells, gone. He got injured, obviously, but now he's at Ole Miss. And we'll talk about the rest of the receivers when it matters. On defense, team's leading tackler is Debo Williams. He's back. So when you have your leading tackler, your defender your leader on defense coming back, that's always a great thing. Their defense was lackluster last year. Jalen Kilgore, a true freshman, balling out of control, second on the team in tackles. He's back. DK Smith, one of the best defenders and most improved players. I think he was the top performer during the spring on the defensive side of the ball. Complete stud. Nick Emmanwori, Nick M is how I call him. Let me tell you guys, when I reviewed tape, Nick M is better than Travis Hunter. Nick M is a top 5 defensive back in the country by my assessment. I believe that man right there will be a top 5 defensive back drafted in the NFL draft next year. You saw it here first. I'll do an I Am Right video when it happens. Right? Top 5 DB, Nick M. Beast of a man. Stone Blanton transferred back home. He went back to Mississippi State. Great player. He's gone. It's unfortunate. They need to find a replacement linebacker, and I think they did that. Right? A couple of these other guys. Bam Martin Scott, stud. I think he got most improved during the spring. Him and another guy. Tonka's tough as hell. They run a 3-3-5 defense, by the way. So their defensive tackles got to take on double teams and stuff like that. That's what Tonka Hemingway does. That's why you don't see a lot of production like in sacks and whatnot. Yeah, he's doing his job, making sure his linebackers can make plays. They lost Grayson Howard. This is Pup Howard. You see it here, though. Only, 18 tackles, not a big deal, but he transferred to Florida to go be the starting linebacker. He is young and talented. That's fine. Jadius Gear transferred in last year from Syracuse, just a role player, not that big of a deal. Keep looking. Nobody of consequence down here. Maybe there is. Oh, there's Vakari Swain. Vakari Swain is the type of talented player you want on your team. As a true freshman, only 2 tackles, but this is a very talented guy in the secondary. Will be in the 2 deep and contributing this year. But let's go look at the team. If we go and look at, I'll talk about transfer portal players. Let's start at the bottom and see who they got, and we'll work our way up. So first they got Buddy Mack coming back home. He's a South Carolina kid, leaving Pitt, coming back home. These are guys that played at Pitt. DeAndre Jules is actually a starter. He's a complete monster and a stud. They have him 6'3", 310 here. Made him 4 stars transferring out of Pitt. That is a great get for South Carolina up front. What's more remarkable is supposedly he's not in the starting lineup right now. DeAndre Jules is backing up Tonka Hemingway. That means they have a lot of depth on the defensive line if you're getting some bona fide starters from Pitt and they don't make your starting lineup. And by the way, Buddy Mack didn't, DeAndre Jules didn't, and according to our lads, neither did Bengali Kamara. We'll get to that when I go over the depth chart. All Pitt starters showed up, and they're all in the 2 deep, but they're not starting. That's incredible. That's really good. It's not bad. That's not a terrible thing. It means you have a lot of depth. Gerald Kilgore, this is the older brother of the other Kilgore, the freshman. Gerald Kilgore he's a year older. He played at Tennessee Tech in the FCS, and now he just transferred in. Just want to keep your freshmen happy. Make sure they don't transfer and leave. Let him play with his brother. I like that move, okay? Jawarn Howell gets all the hype in the world. I got people sending me DMs on Jawarn Howell many times. When I did my running back podcast, people kept saying, Rico, what about Jawarn Howell? Well, he's still young. He just played at South Carolina State. He's a local kid. And now he's getting his dream to play at South Carolina State. Or to play at South Carolina, excuse me. That's fine that he's here, but he's probably third string. It's not a terrible thing. Jared Brown. Losing a guy like Beanie Wells would be a death wish for South Carolina, but I told you South Carolina, if you watch the wide receiver podcast on YouTube, I told you South Carolina is damn near a top 10 wide receiver room. They're probably top 15, top 20, somewhere in that range, and Jared Brown is a huge part of the reason why. They found replacements in the transfer portal at wide receiver that are just studs. And Jared Brown is one of those guys. If you go watch tape on him at Coastal Carolina, it was an FBS recruiting miss. It was a Group of 5 versus Power 5 recruiting miss. Meaning the Group of 5 team, Coastal Carolina, got a player that they weren't supposed to get. That's what Jared Brown is. He didn't belong at Coastal Carolina. It's kind of like Josiah Stewart right now dominating at Michigan on the defensive line. He was at Coastal Carolina, and he just transferred over to Michigan, last offseason, and he played great last year, and he's slated to be one of the best defensive linemen in the country this year. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, Coastal Carolina for a while there found some guys that nobody else found, like value in. And that's, credit to Jamie Chadwell and his staff for identifying certain players and recruiting them to go to Coastal Carolina before he left to go to Liberty. So Jared Brown is an absolute stud, NFL talent. And I think if you're a fan of South Carolina and you're watching this team, you're going to have weapons you didn't anticipate having. And it's one of those players in Jared Brown. Brady Hunt coming over from Ball State. I find it underwhelming. I believe Ball State had a better tight end. This is a different kid. The one that went to, was it Tanner? Tanner's like 6'7". Went to Louisville, I think, and then he backed out. Yeah, not a great transfer there. I'm not too excited about that one. It doesn't really move me. Kyle Kennard moves me. Kyle Kennard, the best defensive lineman at Georgia Tech last year. Believe he had over 6 sacks. Transferring in from South Carolina or to South Carolina, he's going to start. Congratulations. More added depth at linebacker and Kamara, who's actually a really good player. Raheem Rocket Sanders, as long as he's healthy, that's a good running back. You go and get him and Oscar Attaway. Now, I don't like Oscar Attaway at running back. You can like him. You can think he's great, but I watched him lose his starting job to Ayo Adehi last year at North Texas. So to see him come in and get all the praise kind of irks me because I don't think of him as being that good. Yes, he has the prototypical size that you want from a running back. If you're rotating in 3 different running backs like they will be, more power to you, but it really doesn't move me like that. Rocket Sanders does if he's healthy because he's big. He's 6'2", 242, big. Okay, Robbie Ashford coming in to be the backup quarterback. Congratulations. He just transferred in from Auburn. You don't want to see Robbie Ashford on the field. If Robbie Ashford's on the field, there's a problem. I think he should do a position change. They have another quarterback transferring in Davis Bevel, and he was actually the best quarterback, the second best quarterback during the spring, behind, obviously, Lenoris Sellers. Arian Parks is transferring in from Oklahoma. Good depth on the offensive line. Pretty big guy. Didn't do much at Oklahoma. Gage Larvadain, it hurts my soul that Gage Larvadain isn't starting, but I understand that you have so many great wide receivers. That's why this wide receiver room is great. Gage Larvadain, a former FCS transfer, Southeastern Louisiana, the Lions, transferred out of there. This is a former All-American basketball player coming out of high school. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's 5'10", 165, but he can do everything and anything. He's dangerous in kickoff returns and punt returns. He's truly explosive at the wide receiver position. UMass never wants to see him again. If you ever want to see his coming out game, last year for Miami of Ohio, before he got injured, he lit up UMass for, 300 total yards, something crazy. Go watch the game. It's on YouTube somewhere. It's on TikTok. Find it. YouTube or ESPN Plus. Gage Larvadain, Miami of Ohio versus UMass. Go look it up. Amari Huggins, Bruce. Complete stud at Louisville last year, transferring in, being one of those top receivers as well. He and Gage Larvadain are kind of the same size, but Huggins-Bruce a little more refined, and that's why he's the starter. Demetrius Knight, transferring in from Charlotte, giving your linebackers some help. And Demetrius Knight led Charlotte in tackles last year. He led them in tackles, and he's showing up to the SEC. Oh, and by the way, he's not the starting linebacker because that's how much depth you have. You can't go get a group of 5 guy. This ain't Colorado. You don't go get a group of 5 guy and make them a starter. That's not happening over here. They show up and they're backups. Pretty good stuff. Monkel Goodwin, been at Alabama for a long time, never really did anything, but you've been at Alabama for a long time, lifting weights and getting bigger and stronger. This is great depth on the inside. Let's go. Gilbert Edmond, transferring from Florida State to South Carolina. Before he went to Florida State, he was at South Carolina. So he's just coming back home. He was at South Carolina. He was a stud on the defensive line. They loved him. They raved about him. They loved everything. And what I love about this is he didn't burn any bridges. So you leave South Carolina, you go to Florida State, you find out real quick, hey, man, they got guys like Jared Verse and Braden Fitz. They're not rotating me in. They got other NFL guys. So now you come back and you transfer back home, and you're back on a team where they love you. And you're going to be a starter. So Gilbert Edmond, he was starting before he left. He's a complete stud. I bet South Carolina's ecstatic to have him back. Kamar Bell, good depth on the inside. Used to play at Auburn before he transferred to FAU, and now he's transferring back to the SEC. I don't think he's a starter mentality or starter material, but he's definitely good depth. So is Simpkins. Simpkins the third, coming over from NC Central. Just more depth. Not a real big deal, but a huge guy. 6'5", 320, coming up from the FCS, HBCUs, and just getting a chance on the big stage. Dalvin Campbell, I wish he wouldn't have transferred back, but I know you don't get 6'4" wide receivers everywhere. But this is a guy who started his career at Illinois, didn't play much, transferred over to Nevada last year, and now he's coming to South Carolina. It's a late pickup in the portal in the spring. They also got Vidarius Jacobs, and I'm saying when you go and get Jacobs out of Florida State, Jacobs is actually really good. He's young. He was only there for a year. But you sign both these guys in the spring. You're telling me the wide receiver room needed more depth and better players? That tells me that they're not happy with some of the guys behind it, or they're not all healthy. One of the two. But they just have so many receivers now. I would also tell you that in the future, wide receivers are going to want to play with Lenore Sellers. Like, he's that good. He's going to attract transfers. Okay? He's that good. So that's the team in a whole. When you go look at the starting lineup, like I told you, Nick Harbor's here at the X. He's super special. You don't find athletes like that anywhere in the world. Very rare. Gage Larvadain's behind him. Incredibly small in comparison, but Gage is obviously that guy. I told you Luke Doty's a former quarterback turned wide receiver. He's just an athlete. He's everywhere. And we'll talk about some of the awards these guys got in the spring. Doty was recognized in the spring. There's Jared Brown. Pencil him as a starter right now. He's a problem slot receiver. Amari Huggins-Bruce, same thing. These three, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a better 4 wide receivers anywhere. Anywhere. I would compare it to a lot of the other wide receiver rooms out there. Teams like Georgia, teams like Kentucky. You just have special players when you have Jared Brown or even Gage Larvadain not in the starting lineup. That's nuts. Offensive line leaves a lot to be desired. I know that Kaysen Henry got the most improved award on the team for the spring, and I think that's just trying to make him feel better. But you see here, 3 true sophomores have found their way to be in the starting lineup. That's pretty impressive only because of who they're ahead of. When you start seeing them bring in transfers to shore up those position groups and the transfers aren't starting over them, that's pretty good stuff. So it's good, but they all seem kind of mid. So Lenore Sellers being the next Vince Young is going to be problematic if he gets hurt or if he doesn't get enough time to make his reads and make his decisions. He is athletic. He is, fast to where he can avoid the rush, extend the plays, and make something happen, and make some magic happen. I would like it happening on schedule as opposed to off schedule or off platform. Defensive line, like I said, up front, incredibly tough, big, daunting, behemoth of a man up front, but that's what the SEC has up front, and South Carolina's defense needs to step up this year. I really like those 2 up front. I like Gilbert Edmond coming back on the edge, and then you have Kyle Kennard transferring in from Georgia Tech, their best defender. The front 4 looks great. right here. These first four look great. When you look at the next group, DeAndre Jules is legit. DeAndre Jules is ready. He's better than a lot of these other guys, and that's no knock on them. But here you got an Alabama transfer, third string. That's how deep they are on the defensive line. I like the depth of defensive line. Linebacker's a big concern because you just lost Pup, right? Pup Howard, Grayson Howard, and you just lost Blanton to Mississippi State. So you lose two of your really good linebackers, but you still have your team's leading tackler in Debo Williams coming back. Bam Martin-Scott was one of the most improved players on the defensive side of the ball. I think he was most improved on defense, most improved on offense. Kason Henry and Bam Martin. So they're looking to have breakout seasons. Congratulations. And then you have very good depth with two guys who were leading their teams in tackles last year coming in and transferring in. It's not a problem. Mohamed Kaba can play as well. Like, this whole thing is great. Go to corners. Corners leave a lot to be desired. Kinda. I love Vakari Swain and his potential. He's about 2 years away from being an NFL prospect, if you will. I like the Kilgore brothers playing in the secondary. They're very good. Turn on the tape. I love everything about them. But the leadership of this team are these two safeties right here. DQ Smith has been the most dynamic player in the spring on defense. And obviously Nick M is, to me, a top 5 defensive back, better than a lot of other players across the country. I really like this team. I really don't see that many holes outside of the offensive line being young. And obviously, they have a very, very daunting schedule for 2024. And that's the biggest issue here. They're at 5.5 wins when you go look at it, and I don't see any plus money. If I saw plus money, I would chase it for whatever it is. But there's no plus money here. It's really, really down the line, and it's even. So when you go look at it, they're going to beat ODU, no problem. I see them beating ODU at home. Then they're on the road at Kentucky. Last year, if you pay attention, last year they beat Kentucky, okay? In a nail-biter. They beat Kentucky at the end of the year. What's going to happen here is if they beat Kentucky right here, they're going to be slated to win 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 games at that point. At least. And then they got to shock the world with one more win. The thing about it is you're going to beat Kentucky on the road. Kentucky has a new quarterback as well. Brock Vandagriff is the starting quarterback for Kentucky. We don't know how good they're going to be. They just lost Ray Davis at running back. They do have good wide receivers, both of them, Berrien Brown and Key. Offensive lines are very comparable. Defensive line at Kentucky is pretty stout. Linebackers just got a transfer coming in from Georgia. It doesn't move me. And DB's lost some NFL talent. I feel, from my perspective, like South Carolina is better than Kentucky right now. And I also feel like South Carolina, whatever the spread's going to be, because they're going to be underdogs. Kentucky's going to be ranked. South Carolina's not. So Kentucky will be a top 20, top 25 team. And I just think that you should pay attention to that because you're going to bet that spread 100%. Now, do we know how good a redshirt freshman quarterback is going to be? Not necessarily. But we don't know how good or bad Brock Vandagriff's going to be as a starting quarterback in Kentucky. I think he's pretty good. Then you have LSU. I count that as a loss. Just doesn't match up well. But you never know, right? They're at home against LSU. It's going to count as a loss for me. And then Akron, they're beating Akron. 2 weeks to prepare for Ole Miss. I don't think it matters. Don't think they beat Ole Miss this year at home. Don't think they go on the road and beat Alabama. I think they'll be very competitive with Oklahoma. Oklahoma does have great wide receivers, but they also have a young quarterback that makes mistakes and throws interceptions. I think they'll be very competitive with Oklahoma. This is the one that really intrigues me. 2 weeks to prepare for Texas A&M at home. They can do this. A&M, they're both very similar, okay? Both very similar. Then you have Vanderbilt. They're going to beat Vanderbilt on the road, I believe. I believe they're better than Vanderbilt. Missouri, they don't match up well, and Missouri always has their number, blew them out last year, and I like Missouri this year a lot. Beating Wofford is going to happen, and then you're on the road at Clemson. If Clemson's healthy, I don't see how they beat Clemson. So it is razor thin on where you're at with this team. 1, 2, 3, 4 guaranteed wins, and the only way to get to 6 is if they go and beat Kentucky on the road and they beat A&M. It's the only way to get to 6 outside of all the other expected losses. So Do you think they're getting to 6? Do you think they're beating Kentucky and A&M? The easy answer is to say no. They're not going to beat both of them. That's the easy answer. If they were going to beat both of them, then you could go ahead and say the over. But there's no value in saying the over or the under. It's all kind of pick 'em at this point. So I leave it at a lean. I leave it at 1 unit. And I'm going to give you guys this recommendation. As a matter of fact, right here on this video, I'm going to make it an over because I want to bet on the kid, right? I believe in Lenora Sellers. So I'm going to go the over. It's a little bit better at -106. I could potentially miss this, but it's only 1 unit. What I'm going to tell you guys, though, is stay away from betting on first-year starting quarterbacks, redshirt freshman quarterbacks, coaches on a hot seat, although I don't think Beamer's on a hot seat. I think he can win 5 games and keep his job. It just feels like a daunting task asking this team to beat Kentucky and A&M to get to that over. They're not going to beat anybody else. So I'm going to do it, though, because I like this kid a lot. I like Lenora Sellers a lot. I think he's the X factor. I think he's a huge upgrade at quarterback. And that might sound crazy because they just had Spencer Rattler. But Spencer Rattler's a 5th-round draft pick, and Lenora Sellers is not. Lenora Sellers is better than that. Okay? He's better than that. Now, I don't know about his passing acumen. All I saw was a lot of screens, a lot of short reads and things. And in high school, obviously, he diced it up. But the kid looks special. He looks like a great athlete and a leader. And kind of like watching Arkansas State last year just blossom and bloom out of nowhere because of their quarterback that they discovered in Jalen Raynor. It's the South Florida thing where they found Byron Brown. Same thing. This feels like a Thomas Castellanos addition to Boston College. This feels like these dual threat quarterbacks who out of nowhere give your team a chance to win games. And I really like this kid. I think he's great. So I'm going to go South Carolina to get 6 wins. I understand if you stay away from it. I understand if you fade it. But South Carolina's offensive prowess looks pretty amazing. I think they'll be able to keep pace with scoring, and I think it'll be on their defense to try to stop somebody. And we need that defense to come through. Your friends don't know, but Rico knows. I'll see you guys on the next review. Peace.